Welcome to the Brooklyn Rail's 340th New Social Environment. I'm Jess Chen, Events Assistant here at the Rail, and I have the pleasure and privilege of being your MC today for a conversation between Senga Nengudi, Amanda Sroka, and Jason Rosenfeld. We're thrilled to also have the poet Lily B. Moore here who will read to close today's program. We've started all of our events with two important acknowledgements. The first is that here in New York, we are on Lenape-Hoking, the unceded land and waters of the Wappinger, Canarsie, Munsee, and Lenni Lenape people of the Delaware Nation and Shinnecock Indian Nation. The second is an acknowledgement that Black Lives Matter. The heart of both of these acknowledgements is a commitment to the liberation of the oppressed and solidarity for all who struggle for freedom, in recognition that when it comes to liberation, our histories never unfold in isolation. In that spirit, I encourage you all to check out the chat for a living document of resources and actions. And now to introduce today's guests and host. Born in Chicago in 1943, Senga Nengudi lives and works in Colorado Springs. In the 1970s, Nengudi became a leading force within the emerging community of Black artists and musicians whose work engaged with the radical politics of the time through an abstract and dematerialized visual vocabulary. Her media-spanning oeuvre draws on a range of influences including free jazz and spoken word, Yoruba mythology, Japanese art and theater, Brazilian Constructivism, and African ritual. Assistant Curator of Contemporary Art at the Philadelphia Museum of Art, Amanda Sroka joined the museum in 2014 following the completion of her Master's in Art History at the Courtauld Institute of Art in London. Previously, she served as a curatorial assistant at the New Museum in New York, and recent projects of hers at the Philadelphia Museum of Art include Senga Nengudi, Topologies, Sean Scully, The Shape of Ideas, and many more. And the two of them are joined today by Distinguished Chair and Professor of Art History at Marymount Manhattan College, Jason Rosenfeld, who has curated the exhibitions John Everett Millais, Pre-Raphaelites, Victorian Avant-Garde, and River Crossings. He's a senior writer and editor-at-large for the Brooklyn Rail. Jason, take it away.
Thank you so much, Jess, my fellow Dookie. It's great to be back Zooming. I want to thank you and to thank Nick and Fong, of course, and the Rail team, the hardest working team in the art publishing business. Also, thank you so much to Amanda, who I didn't know at all, and she didn't know nothing of me until a few weeks ago, who was great and organized everything, and for Senga for being so willing to join us on our 374th, I think that's right, New Social Environment. I also want to thank the friends of the Zoom, the friends of the New Social Environment who join us almost daily. I see you out there, G.E. Schwartz, Lynn Crawford, my parents, etc., and the Rail team who come, in great numbers. Jonathan Feinberg's with us today. It's great to have all you with us, and I hope you enjoy this conversation. Welcome, Amanda and Senga. How are you two?
Good.
Good. Thank you so much for having us.
Of course. I'm coming to you live from Watermill, the traditional home of the Shinnecock Nation. Amanda, are you in Philadelphia?
I am not actually. I am in Equinox, Pennsylvania.
Nice, the great Northeast Kingdom of Pennsylvania. And Senga is coming up to us live from the East Library in Colorado Springs, one of the great public libraries in this country. I was working yesterday in the Connecticut Public Library in Bohemia, New York. So a little shout out to the public libraries of America who keep everybody connected. So welcome. And I'm going to launch right into the presentation. And of course, be shooting your questions to the chat where Jess will be collating them and we will get to them as we go. Give me 1 second to get set up. Okay. So Senga, welcome. And Amanda, there it is. That's the promo.
Cy Twombly painting.
Cy Twombly, I don't know, but we'll talk about Cy Twombly later.
And basically,
Fun is okay. So just a few plugs, exhibitions. Obviously, the key exhibition is Topologies, which is on right now at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. It closes sadly in 2 short weeks on July 25th. I encourage those of you who can get down to the City of Brotherly Love to go and see it. I went down there pretty soon after it opened to connect with it. It's wonderful, as you'll see from all the images that we're going to show you today. It was first seen at the Lembach House in Munich in 2019, who organized it. That was Stephanie Weber, curator there. And then at the Museo de Arte de Sao Paulo in Brazil. And then at the Denver Art Museum from December 13th, 2020 to April 11th, 2021, and then it came to Philadelphia. It has a wonderful catalog, which I highly encourage people to pick up. It is a vital resource, I would say, not just on Senga's art, on which it is comprehensive, but art of the period, and it's brilliant for students and whatever alike. It's full of documentation, original documents. I never want to encourage people not to go to the library, but it will save you a trip to archives to find a lot of information about our guests today. It is terrific, and it's full of great essays. My only issue with it is it doesn't have an index, but that's coming from an art historian who to flip through books without an index is difficult. But anyway, Munich did the deed, and it is brilliant. So check it out. And the only other problem with it doesn't have an essay by Amanda in it because it came to Philadelphia a little bit later in the process, but we'll talk about that in a bit. I just want to give a personal aside about Philadelphia. I grew up in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. I went to Pennsbury High School, home of the Falcons, Langhorne, PA, which Senga knows well because that's where the rug company, the carpet making company is that she worked with in one of her last works, which we will look at in a little while. And the Philadelphia Museum of Art is the institution that made me an art historian. My parents took me there, perhaps dragged me there on multiple occasions. The painting by Rubens at the left, Prometheus Bound from 1611, 1612, fired my comic book soaked imagination. When I was a kid, my dad used to mess with me and tell me it wasn't in the next room, and there it would be, and it was scary as hell with the bird eating out the organ from Prometheus's side, but the sort of muscle-bound proto-Hulk of a figure, and a large-scale painting is one of the masterpieces of the collection. The painting that stopped me in my tracks in high school and still does every time I go is Barclay Hendricks' Miss T of 1969, which was bought from the artist that year. Extraordinary purchase by the museum. And he was always one of my favorite artists. I'll never forget the Studio Museum retrospective that I went to on more than one occasion. That painting's just a knockout. And on the right is the first painting that I ever wrote a college art essay on at Duke University, Turner's The Burning of the Houses of Lords and Commons, October 16th, 1834. B minus, but it fired me up to do better, I would say. And to try to make something of my my interest in art history. So kudos to the Philadelphia Museum of Art and the new Frank Gehry reworking and edition. The place is on fire. So New Yorkers, get on Amtrak and check it out. Other works that are related to Senga's exhibition, it is a wonderful moment to be looking at work by her generation and her friends and her collaborators. Right now at Diahampton, which is just that direction, about 10 minutes from where I'm sitting right now, is an exhibition of work by Maren Hessinger. You can see it there. It's up through May 2022, inside and outside. There are works outside in the yard, which are also part of the show. So check that out. MoMA is putting together an exhibition about just above Midtown. And they're using Senga Nengudi's image air props from her performance there from 1981 as the promotional image. Dates to be announced, but that will be in 2022. And Linda Good Bryant in a terrific program that Philadelphia hosted, Amanda hosted with Senga and Maren Hessinger had a great line about it. And she said she hopes MoMA will let jam be jam. So let us see if MoMA loosens some of its little restrictions or major restrictions and lets it become a kind of space that is indicative of what went on in Jam's 2 locations in New York City in the 70s and 80s. Also coming up or right now, sorry, is a show at Gagosian on 24th Street in Chelsea, social works curated by Antoine Sargent, featuring works by Linda Good Bryant and numerous important Black artists, which is on view through August. And of course, I hope many of you saw the show at the Drawing Center, which closed in May, of David Hammond's Body Prints, 1968 to 1979, arranged by Laura Hopman, and essential viewing for all humans. It was marvelous. It was fabulous. It got bigger and bigger as it went on because Mr. Hammond showed up with additional works. It has a great small catalog, which includes a rollicking conversation by Senga Nengudi and Linda Good Bryant. Just a fantastic conversation where they're talking about Hammonds and their relationship with him and his work. So you should check that out at the Drawing Center. All the publications are always good. I'm almost there. Also coming up at the ICA in Philadelphia in September is Ulysses Jenkins' Without Your Interpretation, a similarly long needed retrospective of this seminal artist who was, of course, and has been a great collaborator with Senga Nengudi through her career. So look forward to seeing that in Philly in the fall. And also should note that there's a great exhibit of photographs by Lorraine O'Grady at the Brooklyn Museum of Art. So there's a lot to see. Got to get out there post-COVID. It is a marvelous time to go and see art. Okay, so the show at Philadelphia is pretty comprehensive. It really does reveal the arc of Senga's practices throughout the whole of her career. The first show on the East Coast to really do that. I think it's brilliant that it's on the East Coast. It's really important because you're talking about an artist who was one of the few artists who successfully navigated careers on both coasts. And then in Colorado, you know, she has done it. It's an extraordinary thing. So it's great to see it in Philadelphia and get to, you know, introduce essentially another generation to this work of the Black avant-garde. So here is Senga activating one of her works, but I just want to start with a line which was used by Senga in the catalog or manifesto for the Studio Z collective, which was held at Long Beach Museum of Art in December and January of 1977 and 1978. And this was the quote that Senga included in that manifesto, which you can find in the catalog. And each of the artists had a little quote. And she quoted from wonderfully for this talk, and considering where the show is, the great man Charles Demuth, precisionist painter, Bucks County artist. And she quoted a section that reads here: "So many say that they say nothing, but these never really send. For some there is no stopping, most stop or get a style. When they stop, they make a convention. That is their end. For the going, everything has an idea. The going run right along, the going just keep going." And this was Demuth's defense of Marcel Duchamp's sculpture, Urinal, the sculpture of the urinal, which he titled Fountain, which was seen at the Armory Show in 1917. For some, there is no stopping, most stop or get a style. And I think you chose that in 1977, and it rings true today. Maybe say a few words about why Charles Demuth got on your radar so long ago, please, Senga.
Well, I was really committed to keep moving and not stay in a style. When I was looking at art in New York, there were certain artists at that time that just, you know, had something that was commercially, you know, really, really successful for them. And so they held with that style as opposed to moving forward with other ideas, whether it was commercial or not.
So to be protean is a positive. You have to keep light on your feet and
Yes.
keep changing. I think it's a great mantra. And, you know, also you have an example of an American artist who is supporting the avant-garde, who were under fire essentially in America in this period. I think, you know, it has a lot to do with, as I've learned about your art and your collective practice and that idea of just going forward bucking the trend, bucking the idea of the need to be figurative, and going for abstraction. We're going to explore some of that today. So now I would love for you to read.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I must say that early on, I was quite a fan of Picasso. I idolized his work mainly because of that there was this ongoing exploration of other materials and ways of doing, and certainly David Hammond's, my contemporary, my friend, is also very much like that, and I hope I am as well.
Yeah, I think so. And I read that in your conversation in the Hammond's catalog about your interest in Picasso, and you went through a blue period, you said, but
yes,
those works are not in the exhibition. They are not in the exhibition.
High school.
I think too, it's fitting that Lorraine O'Grady refers to your RSVP sculptures as that which can, an artwork that can fit into a suitcase. So the going just keeps going,
Right. Exactly.
A valise like Duchamp, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Senga, I put up this personal statement from you from 1996, and Amanda and I would like to invite you to read it.
Okay. Anything I make has black fingers all over it because I'm Black. Anything I make has the fragrance of a woman because I am a woman. Anything I make has a recognition of spirit and a salutation to the one because I am that.
Nice, thank you. Can you give a little bit of explication about the last phrase? I was just wondering about the kind of references in that.
A lot of what I do is an exploration of spirit and how spirit looks in cultures across the world, and how that manifests. And so that's constantly in what I'm thinking, what I'm doing, the lens of what how I see things.
Mm-hmm. And then it's expression in a kind of ritual that you're
absolutely. Yeah. And it has to do with healing too.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's a very evident element in your art, that it is suffused with feeling, and we will see that as we go through the works. Here is the opening view that you get from the great stair hall in Philadelphia into the exhibition under the watchful eye of Diana, standing at the top of the stairs. Augustus Sangodin's great sculpture in that building, which I know so well. And this view through, showing an image of activation of one of the RSVP works, as we'll see, and then looking into a very curious space, which is this one, with this sculptural installation, Black and Red Ensemble. That's my old high school friend, Scott Jeffries, who's also an artist down in Florida at Scott Art. Check him out. Black and Red Ensemble from 1971, which you have lovingly recreated in this space, a piece not seen since your master's show at Cal State in 1971. So just for a second, I'll show I think this is the one extant photograph of your master's show. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
In 1971. And most artists do not have any documentation of their master's show. I remember I wrote a book on Cecily Brown recently, and she could not find photographs of the shows that she did when she was younger, or maybe she destroyed them. But it is also accompanied in the catalog by a statement that you wrote. And I love the very beginning, says objectives, quote, objectives, to manipulate a series of large black polyethylene half circle shapes within a defined red colored area. So the objective is to manipulate it.
Yes.
The objective is not to make a dead sculpture.
Yes.
Maybe talk a little bit about how that concept infuses everything you kind of work with.
Okay, it really is dealing with the issue of it being choreographed. Dance movement is central to, how I deal with things as well. And so to change it around is sort of to shift it as you would, you know, a dancer. You know, it's a choreographed piece.
And you've described it as an environment for dance, which I think really, and in the museum, Amanda, correct me for the text, the wall text reads, please interact with the sculpture, just kind of don't pull on it because it's
we say we invite you. This was thanks to Senga. We came up with it's the one work in the show that you can touch. So we said we invite you to touch but not tug on the black forms. So.
Right, not tug.
I want actually with all of my pieces for there to be an interaction, not just an observer, but you become a part of whatever energy, you know, you're looking at. So it's very much a co-action in a sense.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that is very generous of you doing that in the exhibit, because I've gone to so many exhibitions recently where you have works where the artists did want you to interact with them, Carl Andre pieces, floor pieces, etc. And the guard's like, no, you can't walk on it. Mm-hmm. And you can argue until you're blue in the face. The artist wants you to walk on it. The piece doesn't exist if you can't actually walk in it, because it changes your environment and it changes your experience. And no, because the monetary aspect of it is more important than the original experiential aspect of it. It's very frustrating. I think of that when I think of Linda Good Bryant's quote, you know, let jam be jam. Will MoMA let jam be jam, where you can actually be a functional part of it. So this I see as a kind of generosity of spirit, which sort of runs through so much of the work.
Say with the jam show, you were mentioning, you know, the dates and everything, but the let jam be jam means also that that energy is still present and still open and exploring and, you know, cannot be tied down, that sort of thing.
One thing, Senga, that I love in terms of the Black and Red Ensemble, which actually leads to these water compositions, is when you refer to it as an environment for dance. Maybe if you could speak a little bit, at the time you were teaching and doing the lessons at the Pasadena Art Museum, which also influenced this idea of kind of movement in the museum space. I don't know if you want to speak to that a little bit.
Well, when I first started at the Pasadena Art Museum, I was, you know, an assistant, and I was doing both. I was working at the Pasadena Art Museum as an assistant teacher, which was not the Norton Museum that's there now. It was in a kind of bodega, not a bodega, a Chinese kind.
Yeah, pagoda kind of structure.
Wrong culture. Okay, so it was a very different place. And Paul Klee was there. I mean, and people of the moment, like Oldenburg and Jim Dine and all of those people were very much involved in happenings. And so I was there and very excited that one could use all of your interest in a performance as opposed to just one thing. If you were a violinist, maybe not a very good violinist, but you could include that in your work and in your concept. And all at the same time, I was also teaching at Watts Towers Art Center under the direction of Noah Purefoy. And you can't get better than Noah Purefoy. So I had these two things going on. I had, you know, the contemporary scene at Pasadena Art Museum, and then I had the richness of Blackness at Watts Towers, both highly experimental at the time. So I was right in the middle and just being infused with all of this wonderful energy. Boom, boom.
Maybe talk a little bit about this, if you would. I was just trying to bring out a couple artists that also, you've already cited a few, who seem to have had an impact on your conceptualization of how to move forward with sculpture?
Yeah, Lydia Clark, you know, when I first saw her work, I went, oh my gosh, I'm not alone. It's okay. It's okay to work with things like that, the temporary, the ephemeral things like that, which I was very much involved with. And that's why when the exhibit when topologies went to Brazil, I was thrilled, absolutely thrilled that my work could be shown there as well.
And it was shown simultaneously in Brazil too, which is quite interesting with based on their configuration. They had your work and Elio Iticica's on here at the same time, who was, of course, a contemporary of Lydia.
What a joy, what an honor. My gosh, yes.
Were you able to go down to see? Probably not, right?
In the middle of the pandemic.
Yeah, it's amazing they put it on. Can I ask, actually, you know, why do you think, why did Munich organize the show initially, at least? And what do you think is the interest in Germany, or why is there a heightened level of interest in Germany in your work?
Well, you know, I really can't say. I can only tip my hat and hug tightly Stephanie Weber, who is the, you know, the author of the catalog. Her scholarship, her research is amazing. I mean, she uncovered stuff I hadn't even considered for a very long time. So you would have to ask her that question.
Okay.
I'm just grateful, you know, that she took it on, and we were able to develop a wonderful relationship. And you know, she started there, and this is kind of the end of the road here. And it's been a fabulous ride.
It's great.
Well, I think too, to have your work shown in those contexts too, from Europe to South America to the States, and seeing how it resonates so deeply with this kind of, you know, the underlying thread of all of it, I think is so powerful. Was one of the reasons why, you know, Jason, you had asked me to just speak a little bit to including Lydia Clark's work. And right after you walk through Black and Red Ensemble, you're greeted by these water compositions, which you showed in your slide. And initially, this is one of those cases where the artwork is no longer meant to be touched or manipulated, although there might be a case in the future, Senga, where you allow for that. But the water compositions were meant to be touched and activated in some way by viewers as kind of, let's say, a precursor to your RSVP sculptures. And the fact that you're using plastic and water, I think, is also just such a direct reference, not only to Lydia Clark, whose relational objects were, you know, manipulating anything from plastic filled with air to water to seashells to, you know, the things that surround us, to also the influence of your time in Japan in 1966 and coming back after having experienced the ritualized practices and avant-garde forms from Gutai to Kabuki to Butoh. So I think there's this kind of way in which your work brings together work that was happening across continents and time, and just speaks to those in a really poetic way. And you'll see in a couple slides also the work of Ava Hesse, and I believe maybe Robert Morris is also included, because simultaneous with this, we're having this moment of what Lucy Lepard called eccentric abstraction here in certainly in New York, and also on the West Coast. So I think it was just to kind of, you know, also show this moment was a moment really ripe for the work that you were doing in the relationship to both conceptual practice and materials.
Yes.
Do you recall if you saw the Ava Hesse show at the Pasadena Art Museum in 1973?
I don't, but I had this thing about her that, you know, I kind of had a pouty lip, because I was thinking, well, I'm doing very similar explorations, but she's in New York and she's getting all the play, and there's no way, you know, I'm going to get this level of play, you know, that she had. So, you know, the whole, besides being Black, the whole LA, New York thing was going on too at that time. You know, LA artists were sort of the stepchildren to the New York scene.
Yeah, I mean, the work is similar, but her stuff is so much more figurative, I guess you would say, thinking about it and what she's working with. There's just some superficial similarities. The last talk I think that Irving Sandler ever gave, that Rail hosted at the Italian Cultural Center in New York, and I remember him saying, "Hesse, never Hesse." I don't know if that's right. Who knows? I guess he knew her. There's a great documentary about her from 2016 by Marcy Beglater, which, if anyone's interested in Ava Hesse, you should certainly check it out. Talking about New York City, and you were just talking about how sort of looking across the continent and thinking about what's happening in New York. And then, of course, you moved to New York in 1971, moved to Alice Neal's hood. We're all about Alice Neal these days in the city. East Harlem, lived in East Harlem, that wonderful neighborhood, Spanish Harlem. And you were working with flag fragments, or the material, nylon material that was used to make flags. And these very poignant images of souls photographed here by Doug Harris. And these are the two which are in the exhibition. And in your statement about these works, you wrote, "Spirits is the subject I am working with. The inner souls or spirits of people I have seen on the city streets, particularly in Harlem." And then these works, which I kind of think of them as sort of modern Aeolian harps. You put them up and you let the wind take them and the light take them, and then they're photographed. Very beautiful works. And of course, I'm sure they don't exist anymore, the actual material, but this was something new, I guess, that you were working with when you moved to New York City.
Yeah, I kind of ever interested in movement, as I said. At that time, heroin was pretty strong. There was a lot of it in the neighborhood, and I would see groups of people on the street corner, and they're almost like willows. They would lean forward, they would lean back, they would lean to the side, yet they would never fall down, ever. And so this movement, this constant movement, was really intriguing to me, even though, it was coming from a place of sadness and pain and all of that. Still within that, it's sort of like a fire. It's like a forest fire. As horrific as that is, there's still a beauty in it. And so that movement, that constant flowing movement, was what I was looking at.
Maybe talk a little bit about documentation, because I know it's so important to your work. You have done work as a photographer, which we'll mention briefly later. But
Yeah.
the way that you thought about your works as, in a sense, kind of ephemeral,
Yes.
but the documentation was something that was very important. And so that collaboration with photographers was a very close collaboration.
Yes, extremely so, extremely so. And Linda's always saying, "Oh, Senga always said, document, document, document." And, even with the piece you mentioned of my, Black and Red Ensemble, similarly, I wanted that documented because I was dealing with the temporary. And the only way you can make the temporary somewhat permanent is to document it.
And thinking also to, your relationship to movement, I think these also speak to a certain relationship to improvisation, in the sense of the movement of the elements of the environment, which improvisation is also integral to your later kind of more also performance-based collaborations and work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we have a question in the chat about that, and about jazz, free jazz, musicians, composers, and improvisation as a survival tool. Would you kind of characterize it as that to a degree?
Yes, there is. There's a quote. I'm trying to remember my little quote. A bouncing ball. How should I put it? A bouncing ball. Well, the point of it is that, you know, with a bouncing ball, you never know where it's going to go or what it's going to do. And I encourage people to be like a bouncing ball. And when I, you know, get stuck, I just play ball, you know, and try and catch it and see, you know, it forces you to go in ways that you normally wouldn't go.
It sounds like a teacher to me. Is that something that you profess in your practice as professor?
No.
Okay.
No, it's what I teach myself, what I, you know, keeps me moving.
Very nice. So the first exhibition that you had, solo exhibition in New York City, was RSVP at just above Midtown, 50 West 57th Street building, which was until recently the home also of Marlborough Gallery, basically an office building in Midtown. And it was up for a couple of weeks, and it included these works, which you call nylon mesh works, which you started working with in 1975. Maybe talk a little bit about how the process of reforming some of these, like RSVP 6, in 2021 with Amanda and the crew at Philadelphia.
Well, true to my nature, I had really kind of forgotten about my RSVP series, and Lorraine O'Grady said to me, well, you know, I think there's still some energy in that, and most people haven't seen this work before, this series before, so, you know, why don't you try it? So Thomas Urban, my gallerist, said, well, yes, let's do it. And I really thank Lorraine O'Grady for urging me and nudging me, because for years I said, no, you know, that's done. I'm doing other things. But I'm glad that I decided to, with that encouragement, to redo some of these pieces, as well as, you know, because of the nature of them, a lot of them had originally found objects in them. There was no way that I could repeat them. So I did an additional series called RSVP Reverie, which was sort of like, okay, this is what that was. I can't do that, but I will give you a sense of what that was.
And we were so grateful to you, Senga, because the work that Jason's showing here on the screen is one that I know actually Laura Hopman, curator of the Hammond show at the Drawing Center, but also included your work quite early on in the Carnegie International, and included this sculpture. And then we were able to, you were generous enough to also, for the Philadelphia presentation, we were able to expand the show in certain ways, including Black and Red Ensemble and this. And it was, in a way, a bit of an adventure, I know, for me and for Alexis Assam, our curatorial fellow, to be able to also kind of go with you through the process of reconstructing these and talking about, you know, how have pantyhose changed even from 1976 to, you know, we must have sourced hundreds of pantyhose. Also, we were doing all of this work remotely, so we're sending Senga, you know, various options and ideas. So that was really, I think, a gift for us to be able to be part of that process with you, and that you were willing to do that. And we can now, thankfully, we were able to bring that work into the museum's collection.
Yeah. I was wondering about this whole history of pantyhose. My memories of it are shoddy from the period, but I do remember Legs, which came out in 1970. And a distinction in Senga's work with RSVP series, as we'll see some more of them, is that they had to be used. They were already worn. Some were procured from friends. Some were bought from thrift shops, etc. And, you know, the advertisements, I was just looking through some of the advertisements in the 70s, it's mostly white models. But in the 80s, it gets a bit more interesting, you know, different body types, people of color in the ads, the sort of possibilities of of pantyhose. I don't know anything about it. I just remember my mom would buy them, and the very satisfying click of the egg, that egg, which was a brilliant marketing tool. And the idea of these sort of material, which is so diaphanous, which is so tender in a way, and then stretching it to its possibilities. I know that the title RSVP, you've talked about that as serving as a kind of invitation to your audience, but it's different from the black and red piece. It's not an invitation to actually touch them, manipulate them. How do you characterize it as a kind of invitation?
The invitation is sort of to draw them in to, whatever the energy of the piece is. I think about Aboriginal art, and a lot of the Aboriginal art deals with time. What is it called? Time travel? Is that right?
Time shifting?
No. It's almost like time travel. And so for myself, I'm in front of a traditional Aboriginal piece, and I feel like I want to go on the journey with it. I can step into this canvas and I can, oh boy, I'm pretty sure it's called time.
It's called creation time.
Is that it?
Creation.
That's what I mean, this idea of like you're entering into this like journey, and
Right.
It's on a different temporality than our sense of kind of historical time. You're going back into, and it's a
Right.
process for the creation of the works.
Right. So in front of my work, I'm inviting people to bring themselves to it, and then to, have an experience, a co-experience with me, so that after they've been in front of the piece, they're with it, they're thinking about it, then a third thing happens. My piece is there, they're there, and then this new thought hopefully comes up, that shifts their thinking.
Do you ever think about them with respect to drawing? Because the way that they are organized in space. Okay.
Absolutely. You can't deny that, the lines that form when I create these pieces. And I must say that in the beginning, I was working with galleries, nonprofit galleries, and there was no budget ever. And so I had a friend, his name was Danny Davis, and he was a musician, a saxophonist, and flautist with Sun Ra. And so they traveled all over the world, and one day he showed me this satchel he had, and inside the satchel were all these magical things from Egypt and all these other places. So at that point, I really got fascinated with this idea of special things inside luggage, as well as being a woman, and pretty much all women have a purse, and your life is in that purse. And so with that in mind, with most of these sculptures, I was able to put them all in a bag, in a satchel, and take them to a museum or a gallery, and then just start setting up the show. And I could have a little tiny bag, but they stretched enough where I could really fill up a fairly large space with them.
And now the way that institutions work, your small bags have boxes for the boxes for the boxes. So it's a little different now, but I just wanted to say that in terms of the relationship to drawing, it's also quite interesting because the Venezuelan artist Gego, and who we've talked about Senga too, called her sculptures drawings without paper. And I think that's also a way in which when you see the life and the kind of presence of these Pantyhose lines, it really has that kind of power of drawing too.
And drawings in space, to a degree here. And people should know that if you're not that familiar with these works, that they are filled with various objects, but the sand is material that weighs them down. This is sand, which is being used to make these forms and shapes. And then the works are activated to a degree in the performance, as we'll talk about in a minute. This is a wonderful work, Inside Outside, which incorporates attire and braiding and all different colored nylons. And here's a work called this one, which is terrific performance piece from 1977, which is one of the most intricate designed works and probably not so easy to put up in the gallery from the National Museum of Modern Art in Paris from 1977 and installed here at the show. You can go see it. And I was just thinking about, the idea you're using these pantyhose. People have written pretty wonderfully about this stuff. There's a great essay by Ian Edward Wallace in the catalog about this material. I was thinking about the way you talk about the way that your body changed as a woman, you had children. Pantyhose is a kind of marker for that, and the history of art, and images like Gustave Courbet's Bathers on the left, where you can see the actual marks of the corsets and the crinolines on the bodies of the nude women that he was painting in the period. One of my advisors at grad school was Linda Nochlin, and she wrote a lot about this, the idea of the manipulation of the female body through dress and societal expectations. And there's an artist who lives from Detroit who teaches at Michigan, Annika Kupatelli. I don't know if you know her, who does these extraordinary sculptures, structural garments, which are a kind of reprise of these sort of crinolines and fabrications of form and working with fashion and fabric, but also showing the manipulation of the female body. And it feels like that's something that was very much a part of how you're thinking in staging performances, using modest boom boxes, and doing these kind of installations with these nylon mesh works. As you can see in the title, there's a photograph of Senga and Maren Hassinger resting before their performance at Pearl C. Woods Gallery, Los Angeles in May of 1977. There's a whole series of terrific photographs by Harmon Outlaw of this performance and this activation of these works. And here's an example of one of the contact sheets, which is in the exhibition. I should note the exhibit is not just thorough in terms of the works or restaged works, but also documentation and materials and ephemera from these performances. So here's the triptych of images of this activation of this piece. The sculpture is a dance partner, one of your quotes I read, which I thought was particularly lovely. So maybe talk a little bit about the kind of relationship between the performer and the object and the way that it activates into a work of art.
Well, it kind of says it all. The sculpture is a dance partner, and I'm looking at it as if, well, when you're dancing and you're dancing, with a male partner, he kind of guides you a bit. His hand is at your back, and this and that, and traditional dance, social dance. And so it's kind of like that. There's this partnership where, it gives some kind of guidance, but then you as the activator can then move around and make it, I guess you might say, your own. And well, actually, I won't say your own, because it is a partnership. It's a back and forth. It's finding each other's rhythm and form.
When that I think speaks so well, Senga, to the fact that like these aren't choreographed. These are improvisations. And in the same way I even think of like with jazz music, it's kind of like a callback one to the other. And the same with dance. So there is this like relationship that happens.
Call response type thing.
Yeah, I have a question about that, because some of the stuff I read said that there's a repertoire of movements that you've choreographed that the performer can use, but it's not controlled in that sense. Is that what you mean, Amanda? It's not linear in a sense.
It's there's not a repertoire of movement, but there's a repertoire of concepts that I'm dealing with. I might tell them, about extending themselves, yielding to the material. I use words like that, and from that they find their own movement within the piece.
Because you even recalled saying when the Pompidou piece was last activated, the work that Jason, the RSVP performance piece of, the dancer was just kind of swinging around one of the parts. And so there is that element, I'm sure, of surprise for you too, after you give that, framework, and then it's up to the dancer to see what happens.
Right.
It's also interesting to hear you talking about the gender and the male and the female relationship, which I know is a part of so much of your performance work. And here, of course, the male is gone. The male is absent. There's just the material.
It depends on the activation.
Yeah.
I have a few, oh, that's lovely. I have a few of the activations that included a male.
Okay.
And so it's really fun to see how the dynamics change when, it's male and female, when it's female and female, all of that.
And I think so much of the work already is about, even when you see the sculptures, themselves, it's like you blur our associations of what we know as male and female, even down to, thinking of whether, are you seeing a breast, are you seeing a testicle? You play with that in the sculpture before it's even activated, of that kind of interplay of sex.
These are just a couple of works. If you think about this idea of masculinity and power and working with these kinds of forms in Japanese dance on the left. And then this, I had to put a little Victorian art in there. I can't help it. Frederick Leighton, and that idea of stress and strain and muscularity, which is very different from, the kinds of activations that you and Maren Hesse are working with in these activations, in these performances. There's just another photo from 1977. And also I was thinking about it in terms of activation, because that's a term that is used throughout the art world. So there was a great Alexander Calder show, Hypermobility, at Whitney, which I reviewed for the Rail, where it's about these mobiles that need to be activated. And Calder was very playful. He enjoyed, activating his own sculpture. But here you have this amazing image, I think, on the right of this person in like a lab coat, right, with gloves and a staff. And medical booties. Yeah, and the medical booties, who is activating the sculpture and then disappears, right? Like you have to have a kind of degree to do it, because you couldn't do it, the audience couldn't do it, right? Because again, these are too valuable, these sculptures. Although if you were savvy, you could blow on them and they would move, that kind of thing. But there's something much more engaged and I think intimate, certainly, in the way that you were working with your sculpture. And does the activation complete the sculpture in a way?
Yes. Yeah.
Although some sculptures aren't meant to be activated, right?
Right.
I'm sorry.
Some sculptures aren't meant to be activated, right?
Of course not. Yeah. But the ones that are, it completes it. As I say, you complete me. It completes it because of this human energy. And I think, about the fetishes, African fetishes and so on, where, there's all this energy that's put into the piece that makes it more potent.
Here's a photo of you performing in 1976.
Yeah.
And then this one is the installation in Philadelphia with the film running of an activation of a work. This is RSVP 10 from 1976. I think we should keep going though, and because in the idea of time, instead of showing the clip, but everyone can see great clips. Maybe Jess can put it in the chat that Philadelphia has posted on their website of Maren Hesse working again with these materials in more recent times.
And this was our way, I should just say too, of representing some of these activations for Philadelphia. We would have loved to have an in-person performance, but due to the pandemic, we weren't quite sure if that would even be possible. So we thought the best, and Stephanie was so generous in letting us kind of think through the exhibition and the floor plan, as well as Senga. And so that was kind of our way of having the performances represented without being able to actually have activations happening on site.
So you just mentioned fetishes, and maybe we can talk a little bit about some of the performances as we move towards more of a conclusion here. Ceremony for Freeway Fetes, you see here from 1978. Fetes, which I've learned today from Amanda, they're short for fetishes, but it also feels like a pun on the French fête as a kind of party, you know, something celebratory. So this was held under the freeway in LA, supported by the Brockman Gallery, which was the first major Black-owned gallery in Los Angeles, also with support, bizarrely, from Caltrans, the Highway Commission, and CETA, which was a government arts program. And here they are under the I-110 near West Pico Boulevard and Santa Monica Freeway. This was the stage, the setting. I see this here, it says, it invites you to attend. Did a lot of people attend this, Senga? Okay.
No. Again, documentation was critical.
Right. And one of the cameras broke, right? The film.
We thought, you know, my friend, Barbara McCullough, who's a filmmaker and a photographer, she was going to town, you know, filming this video, and then found there was a problem. So thankfully, Kwaku Young was there taking, you know, stills. And if that wasn't the case, no one would know about this.
Mm-hmm. So this improvisational performance, which also included art, nylons, meshes, which were attached to the pillars of the freeway. You have musicians or people playing music, a kind of costume. We just have a few photographs here.
Senga, because in the 1996 quote, you were talking about the recognition of spirit, could you maybe speak a little bit to your role and Marin's role and David Hammond's role in this performance and this kind of the male and female energies?
Well, my concept was, and these are all artists and poets, they're not professional musicians, part of Studio Z. My concept was, I was, you know, a uniting spirit, and David, you know, was of course the male spirit, Marin was the female spirit, and I was trying to bring them together in harmony so that we work together as Black people. We work together for our common good as opposed to any particular conflict that was within us.
Can you maybe identify a few of the people in this photo? Because we were doing this in class and with Laura Hopman, and we're trying to figure out who is who. And I haven't been able to find that anyway.
Okay, to the extreme left is David Hammond's.
Okay.
Behind him, there's an individual photo, which I don't know if you have, but that was Rojo. This person here, Kenneth Severin, is a poet. Duvall, and this is Franklin Parker, myself, Parker, Marin, and Ulysses did a lot of performances together.
Right.
This is Joe Ray. Oh, can you see me pointing?
Pointing. But I'm kind of following along. So the person here is
in the red. That's Joe Ray, we find painter as well, and a Marin in the front.
And Marin in front. Okay. For that alone, this thing will go down in history as identifying the figures in here.
Wait, who is behind Joe Ray?
You know, I'm not sure.
This person, unknown, someone who just stumbled along.
Yeah.
You know, it only lasted for an hour, right, Senga?
Yeah.
It's amazing to me because these photographs are so powerful.
Yeah.
And you know, it has not an outsized importance. I think it has an incredible importance. This is one of the seminal works of the period, I think, just in terms of my understanding of it, and you know, the way that you were working with these urban spaces that were the product of depopulation and urban quote unquote renewal, and activating them in the way that you had, I think, also in Harlem to a degree. It's such a powerful notion. People should study more about this stuff, this ceremony for freeway fetes. And of course, the lost footage is a shame. But in a way, it lives in the imagination, right?
It does. You can create your own fete.
This is you in the center in the yellow?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's me. And it was kind of the first time I had ever worn a mask, so to speak, something over my face. And it was amazing, you know, how something else took over. And I, you know, just yield to that energy. And it felt like it was something outside of myself, beside myself, within myself. And it just was so exhilarating.
I think the idea of the avant-garde is so based in a kind of idea of style and formal development through the history from the late 19th century on. We're thinking about the avant-garde here, and you as part of the avant-garde in America in the 1970s, working towards change, but not necessarily in visual art. Would you agree with that?
Across the board, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Across the board, how could you not?
Right, that it's not really a formal idea, that what you're producing is not really a formal idea. That goes back to the Demuth quote, I think, but that's also, you know, one of the things that really sets apart your project from so many other artists in the period. It's participatory. You've described public art as the best kind of art, and in some way, it's all a kind of public art, right?
Yeah, it's, I can't, public art is so important because it's there for you in a sense always, as long as it's, you know, viewable. Sometimes they paint over murals and this and that, but it's there for you. Whereas the experiences you have in museums and galleries, kind of for the moment, you go, you see it, you might go back a couple of times, but the show is over and that's it. But if it's a public artwork, if it's a sculpture, whatever, it's something as you're going to the bus stop that you can lean on, or you can be protected by, or you can look at it. And then that might happen, that might be for 10 years. And one day, when you decide to look at it, actually, you're at the bus stop and all of a sudden there's nothing else to do but look up there. It's there for you, to give to you, to ideally inspire you. And it's waiting for you in a sense. Whereas these other ways of seeing aren't necessarily like that.
Well, you just go with the condition, right? Like, if you're going to a museum or a gallery, there's like an expectation on how to look, even how to walk, you know, and at the time. Whereas if something's colliding with your everyday experience, it's like the ultimate act of generosity in a way. It's there for you, even if you don't ask for it or expect it.
Generosity and exposure, because so many people don't go to the museum because they feel uncomfortable, because they feel like they won't understand it, or something like that. And this other thing, that's all I can say. It's there for you.
Barbara McCulloch has a great line about your performance Dance Card. She describes it as being thrust into the arena of learning to see.
Yeah.
And I think arena is such a loaded word in American art history, thinking about abstract expressionism, treating the canvas as an arena for one person to operate, right? But that's not what's happening right here. It's thrust into the arena of learning to see. It's on the viewer, the visitor, to come into it and to experience it. Have you ever been tempted to make, I know it's kind of not in your artistic DNA, but be tempted to make a more permanent public artwork, or been asked to?
Yes, I've been asked. Yeah. It can be, it's in the realm of possibility, but it's not my normal way of doing things. But yeah, I'd love to do it. but it feels that immediacy is hard to get in something that's permanent.
I think that one of the quotes that you have too is about the what you're interested in as an artist is not the permanence of objects also. So creating an experience for someone, which can happen through permanent objects, but also, you know, it's something beyond that.
I think a colleague of yours would have said the same, maybe, but now we have Day's End by David Hammond on the waterfront on the Hudson River, a reprise of, you know, work by Gordon Matta Clark from 1973, same period as all this, you know, I think so. That's a gift in a sense. I live right down the street from it. It's terrific. So we'll see what happens. I'm going to move on a little bit.
On the latest thing on Days In is that he threw some tennis shoes up there.
Yeah, I saw that, right? That's a typical New York thing. You throw shoes up and let them dangle and then photograph. It's ideal.
Yeah.
So speaking of David Hammond's, there you see on the back wall in this installation shot, one of his body prints. This is a really potent room in the exhibition. It includes the work that we already just looked at, the ceremony for Freeway Fetes, but also a couple of old school monitors here with some of your performances or choreographed performances, films, which I encourage people to spend some time with in that room. Lo-fi, but potent. And here are just a couple slides to show people some of these works. Air Propos from 1981, performed at just above Midtown. This was in the Franklin Street location, downtown.
Yes.
This was such a treat to get to include because of the preparations that Linda Goodbryant is undergoing as part of the incredible, you know, jam show at MoMA. She was unearthing in previous iterations of topologies. We only had the still photographs that you're seeing here, and then she found video documentation by Ulysses Jenkins of this, which was we were so grateful to get to include it, and worked with Senga to make a selection from the documentation. So that's really highly encouraged if you come to the show to spend some time with that.
Senga, can you talk about what you do? Choreograph or arrange it, and the costume? Maybe give us a sense of how much of it you're involved in creating.
You mean in this particular piece?
Yeah, I mean, maybe we go through a couple pieces. I know this is Studio Z piece.
Oh, well, actually it's not.
Oh no, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right. I have it wrong.
Yeah. There's some situations where I would have a dancer or someone as almost like a model, and then I would kind of sculpt a costume on them. And once I completed that act, then they would then, again, in a sense, you know, activate their costume.
Did you give any instructions to Butch Morris or to Cheryl Banks? I know there's a couple moments where, you know, the two of them, it's again the like call and response thing. Were there any particular notes or words that you gave them or that you thought of yourself? There's such a powerful, like, you breathing into your own hands as part of this and playing with your breath. Were there grounding ideas for this work in particular?
Well, yeah, there's a level of instruction that goes with it. But I must say to you that my ADD is kicking in. I'm feeling like I should do something just to break this up a little bit. I don't know what, but it's really interesting with Zoom calls. You kind of like keep going and you keep going and this and that and that and this. And
you want to read a poem?
Okay.
Would that be good?
That'll be good.
Okay, let's read a poem.
I think it's ready to shake things up.
It's improvisation.
Yeah, I don't want to shake things up drastically, but I'll read a poem. But maybe I should do it drastically, I don't know. Okay, so Lilies of the Valley unite. Lilies of the Valley unite, or not. Me being me, Me being is not an action verb. While others of my sort bang about creating monuments of steel, marble, granite, this is what the craft's all about. Working hard with pleasure, pounding things out is a pleasurable pursuit. Working hard as I hardly work, I relish in creating art wherever my lazy eye finds it. My colleagues work hard to bring their plans to fruition. Giant canvases packed with color, rooms filled with stuff strategically placed. Then am I, the queen bee, content to have my grapes peeled or not, content to watch the workers scurry about. I take a pointer, touch an object and say, there, I proclaim you art, as a queen would say to a knight. Problem is, nobody recognizes this process of art. There's no stamina involved. Thinking time is minimal, hands-on barely. Lilies of the valley unite. I think not. Lilies of the valley don't do a damn thing, yet our presence is felt like an anarchist because we do indeed exist. Lily B. Moore.
Beautiful. Lily B. Moore is the persona that you write under. And you did mention to us that you don't really see them as poetry, but more as writings.
Yes.
Sort of complementary to the work, to the artwork.
Exactly, kind of artist statements.
We encourage people to go to your website, and I put the page up here so you can read a little bit more about that. And you can also see Senga's persona as a painter and photographer. So I think this may be the first time in a new social environment that we've had the artist and also be the poet do the reading.
I think it's so cool, Senga, how you were talking about, you know, with Ceremony for Freeway Fetes, that first time putting on a mask, and then with these personas, you really are kind of embracing these other identities and blurring and abstracting, and the ultimate gesture of abstraction in terms of even your own identity and artistic output. So I'm so grateful to the Rail for letting us share that aspect of your work, because we couldn't include it as much in the exhibition.
Me too.
Yeah, so there's no hiding now. Senga, your work is out there and everybody's getting to see it, and magnificent. You know, we had a few more things, but I just think we should end there and go to questions. You'll have to go to the exhibition and see the concluding works, where it's just some of the more recent installations and film and sound pieces. Really very beautiful one, like this one, Warp Trance, which was the product of a residency at in Philadelphia at the Fabric Workshop and Museum there, on display. And
you can give a shout out, as you did in the beginning, to Langhorne.
Langhorne Carpet Company, still going strong.
When we called them and asked about the materials for this, they immediately remembered working with Senga, which I think is such a testament to you, Senga, as well. And they remembered this project. So we are super grateful that they were willing to let us use their materials again and support this work.
And Butch Morris, who we just saw in the 1981 Air Propo, did the sound for composition for this piece.
Yes.
So the collaboration continues.
Yes.
And, yeah, I have to say, you know, the exhibit had a powerful effect on me. I'm so pleased we were able to do this today. I was able to teach some of this work last term with my students, because we were able to go as a group to the show at the Drawing Center and read your conversation. So it's been an absolute pleasure. Go ahead.
I do want to mention that I'm in collaboration now with 3 other artists, and this whole issue of collaboration is so important to me in terms of ever, you know, stretching myself, so to speak. And collaborations, you know, kind of help the collaborators kind of grow. And this collaboration is with Eddie Kwan, who is a musician and performance artist, and Crow Nishimura and Joshua Cole. Those two are founders of Degenerate Art Ensemble. I would encourage you, truly, these are amazing people, to look up their work. And we're working together through Colorado College, and it'll also, Crow and Joshua are based in Seattle, and Eddie now is actually in New York. He was in Cincinnati, and so it's been a very rich experience for me, and we'll be premiering that work probably in January or February of 2022.
Fantastic. Tantalizing.
Very cool.
Yeah. We'll look forward to that. Amanda, what's your next project?
I am, oh my gosh, it saddens me to even talk about the next project, because I feel like I didn't get to live long enough with topologies. But Senga, you and I are not done working together. I know that for sure. My next project is, we have a new commission and acquisition series as part of the collaboration with Fondazione Sandretto Rerabadengo in Turin. So we are working with, the next commission is with Martine Sims, whose work will premiere in Turin in September and come to Philadelphia in the spring of next year. So actively working on that. And we have a wonderful publication that accompanies that with a great essay that's in the works right now with Christina Sharp. So certainly stay tuned for that.
Excellent. And when you go to Philadelphia in the next 2 weeks to catch Senga's show again, or for the first time, there are some other wonderful exhibits there, including a terrific show about contemporary artists in Philadelphia, which I also recommend.
New Grit.
So I'll turn, New Grit, yeah, New Grit. It's a tribute to Gritty. So I'm going to turn it over to Jess, who will shepherd us into questions. Thanks for coming. Also, Alexis from Philadelphia, who was critical in working on the exhibit. Go ahead, Jess. Thank you so much, Senga and Amanda.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Senga.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Amanda. And thank you, Senga, of course. This has been a lovely conversation. I believe our first question actually comes from Alexis. Alexis, you should be able to unmute.
Thank you all for this fantastic conversation. Always constantly learning more about your practice, Senga, which I'm really enjoying. Since the last slides that we saw were from Warp Trance, I was wondering if you are interested in creating more video works in the future, and what inspires you to keep creating all the time?
Because that's kind of who I am. And I would very much like to do video projects in the future. Very, very much like to do that. And I think if I stopped, then I would stop, basically. Yeah.
Thank you, Alexis. Our next question comes from one of our Rail regulars, G.E. Schwartz. G.E., you should be able to unmute.
First of all, before I ask my question, thank you so much for carrying Butch's spirit forth and having him a part of this such an amazing force for all of us. But anyway, could you talk a little bit about your sculptural work as an act of resistance? And I'm thinking of how many of the sculptors, especially working with Pantyhose and stuff like that, seem to conjure up, views of, ideas of weaving, and of course, sex, birth, and even bondage. So could you talk about that as those things as maybe sources of acts of resistance and uses for that?
I'm not sure if I can think of it as act of resistance. Sometimes I find that some of my works are so very intense that And when I'm doing them, you know, I just do them. And then I reflect on what I've just said afterwards. And, you know, this whole issue of fragmented bodies and you know, and in a sense, you know, bondage and so on. It's disturbing, but it's real, and it comes from, you know, real places, you know, within me. And this examination of how we do distort our bodies, and how we are dealing with this sense of perfection, that you know, is often troubling. All of that is in it. I saw a Botox commercial. Botox was originally, you know, for older people, you know, to decrease the lines and so on. But in the commercial world, they are making these people younger and younger. And young women, like 30 years old. And what's really funny is they have, you know, young Black women. And, you know, there's a thing that says Black don't crack for, you know, a number of reasons. But still, they, you know, they're promoting it to sell their product to younger people, and creating this paranoia and fear of not having the proper body.
In 1977, I just want to add this real quick. 1977, I saw Dick Gregory in concert. And Dick Gregory at that time had a long piece about pantyhose and how much they were deforming and how much they were bondage, and women had to start getting rid of them. Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much. Huh?
Yeah.
Dick Gregory, Butch Morris.
Butch Morris, absolutely.
We have another question from Susan Landgraf, who is not here with us now, so I'll be asking on her behalf. Her question was, how do we make decisions about the use of space? And she wanted to hear more about your interest in the spirit and the influence of African art and fetishes on your thinking.
That's a heck of a question. You'll have to break it down. It's like a whole thesis, a whole.
It's a very
PhD thesis.
Down, please.
I think she had three main parts: how you use space, your relationship to the spirit. She wanted to hear more about that, and then African art and fetishes.
Well, I think we kind of chatted about that through this whole presentation, but the use of space is, there's nothing you can do except do it. I mean, you have to, it's an action type thing.
Maybe Senga, you could speak to the fact that, I mean, even with the exhibition, if you think of when it started at Lembach House in 2019, that first iteration, how it's so spatially different from the Philadelphia Museum of Art. And I remember kind of your first encounters with the actual exhibition space, just to maybe speak to that.
Yeah, every space has its own energy. It's amazing to me that I can go into one space and put up my work, and then that same exact work can be put up someplace else and have a whole other kind of energy to it. So I like space. Space is the place, but I can't really answer that except to say that you have to kind of enjoy what space has for you. I don't know if that makes much sense, but it really does. It's there. It's there for you. You go in there and it talks to you, and that might include the whole issue of spirit too. It talks to you, it tells you what it wants of you. And again, you can have an inner relationship with it.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Senga, so much for that. Fung, our artistic director and publisher, can't be here to ask the last question today, but I will give the mic to Catherine, who is also part of our Brooklyn Rail staff.
Hi, thanks so much for spending your afternoon with us. I would love to know, since we have a lot of young artists in the audience and artists who will be watching this later on our YouTube, do you have any pieces of advice or takeaways, things to do or not to do for people who are making art and on that trajectory today? Thanks.
I think probably any artist would tell you this, that you have to be true to yourself. You have to be true to your own voice and not be afraid to express it. I was talking about Lygia Clark, and I was really terrified to do certain experimental things that I was doing, but to see that she was also doing it and getting some recognition for that really helped me to have the courage to continue doing things the way I wanted to do them. And so it really is a matter of persistence. Just hanging in there as long as you can. I have this whole thing, better late than never, and clearly with my career, it has been that. But I've not wavered from my process of art and my way of doing. And so people are kind of catching up with that now. But that's the most important thing, to hang with it. There are plenty of artists I've known along the way that is so much more gifted, talented, whatever, but they fell by the wayside for one reason or another. And so just staying the course, I might say. And as Linda O'Brien said with one of our talks, staying human, being human, and all that would indicate.
Yeah, she said, become more human every day.
Yes, exactly.
Thanks so much.
That's a beautiful quote. Become more human every day. Thank you so much, Senga, for reading your writing today, and of course for your brilliant conversation. And thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, everyone who tuned in today, and for all of your questions. Join us tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern for a radical poetry reading with I.S. Jones, featuring readings by Kamogna Felix, Patricia Humanik, Ladan Osman, and Gaia Rajan. You can now turn on your microphone and say goodbye as you leave.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Thank you so much, all of you, for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senga. It's wonderful.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Senga.
Amanda.
Thank
That
you,
was
Jason.
awesome.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you, Scotty J, for coming.
Beautiful work. Beautiful work.
Hi,
Beautiful.
James.
Thank you
Thanks,
so
Dad,
much.
for coming, checking
Thank you
in,
very much.
everybody.
Good talk.
Miss you
Thank
guys
you.
at the rail. Hope to see everybody
A
soon.
terrific conversation. Thank you.
Likewise.
Thank you,
Mr.
Charlie.
Rosenfeld.
There's Lewis.
Bye.
Lewis in
Thank
the
you so much.
background.
Oh,
This
so
is like the
nice.